If you have been enjoying listening to the stories of entrepreneurs across Edinburgh, then why not subscribe? If you're on YouTube, you can hit the red button down below and hit the bell to get notifications. Or if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, then subscribe to the podcast. We hope you enjoy the show.
Malcolm, welcome.
Yep, thank you.
Delighted to have you on here. So look, a well-known name in Edinburgh, hugely successful career in the legal profession and in business generally, and chairman of Hibs.
Chairman of Hibs now, chairman of Hibs again.
Again.
20 years after the last time.
So look, you've got a kind of a huge career spanning many decades, so I'm sure you've got loads of stories to tell. And so we're delighted to have you on Edinburgh Business Stories. So thanks for coming along.
Yeah.
Where do we start?
Well, I'll start at the beginning, day one.
Day one, okay.
Going into the law firm of Henderson & Jackson, a very sleepy law firm in Rutland Square in Edinburgh. And I have this abiding memory of being taken downstairs. I was 21, so I'd been taken downstairs and shown the apprentices' room, which was slightly damp with a gas fire that didn't work. And then they took me through to the typing pool, which I'd never seen a typing pool before. But in the typing pool, there was 6 ladies who were all reading their shorthand notebooks, typing on golf ball typewriters, which I think were absolute state of the art at the time. And, having a fag hanging out the corner of their mouth, an ashtray on their desk, while chatting to each other. I have rarely been so impressed by such multitasking. It was unbelievable. These ladies were fantastic. And they saved my life on hundreds of occasions where elderly partners would tell me what to do and send me off with a set of instructions that I couldn't remember by the time I got back to my desk. But they'd been in the room, taken it down in shorthand. It would come to me with a little note later. There you are, son. That's what you're supposed to do. So they saved my life on 100 occasions. But early on, within the first few weeks, in fact, of being starting in this role as apprentice lawyer, I was given the job of going to the King's buildings, the University King's buildings, first thing in the morning, collecting 6 live mice. I then drove to the Royal Highland Show because our client, the Royal Scottish Forestry Society, had a wild cat on its stand and I had to get in before the crowd and feed these live mice into the. So the extraordinary benefits of that to my legal career just go without saying. It was the most. I couldn't. Nobody could believe it really. There, but the pay at that point was £950 per annum. Mm-hmm. And people can look at you and say, well, it was 1975, but let me tell you, in 1975, that wasn't a lot of money. Mm-hmm. That was £19 a week, and it wasn't very easy to live on that. Mm-hmm. But we stuck with it. It was a firm that had 4 elderly gentlemen who were partners. They were very able in their different ways. They cared about their apprentices. They trained us properly. They made us... if anything was wrong, you got told it was wrong, and you got told to fix it. And it was a hard school, but it was actually, I think, pretty good for us. And I was originally, the firm was based in acting for landowners and farmers, and it was they were so agricultural law, which is actually very complex, or was I regard as very complex in Scotland, and that's what I was trained to do, which is their business, which was to be an agricultural lawyer. But when I went out to the farms with them, I came from Liberton and Edinburgh, not really from a farming or agricultural background. These guys would go and say, oh, your beasts are looking well to the farmer. And I think, God, they're covered in muck and flies. And I went, really? Is that looking good? Or your grass is green? And I'm thinking, okay, grass is green. So I thought, I'm not really going to do much here. I can't see myself with a background that I've got ever making it as an agricultural lawyer. So we had to take a slightly different turn. So at the same point, so I don't know what I was then, 26 maybe, 25, 26, I thought my friends were starting to buy flats. So I became a conveyancer almost overnight, and we were incredibly fortunate in being very successful at that. And we built quite a big business, and a very, very profitable business. Very quickly. Mm-hmm.
So by this time, at 26, had you then you'd started to kind of move the business into that?
Strangely, so I qualified in 77, I was an assistant 78, and they made me a partner in 79.
Right.
Which was truly bizarre. I mean, in these days, not quite as ridiculous as it would be now.
Right.
I mean, that doesn't happen now, never happened now. But I've known other people that happened to as well. But they were elderly. They knew that they were marching towards the end of their careers, and they saw somebody that maybe had a bit of a clue as to what to do. So they decided to hang on, and they looked after me very, very well. And we built this conveyancing practice that made them a lot of money. When they all kind of retired in the early 80s, and they just all went away. And then I was 28 with the business. They didn't ask me for anything. They just left. Well, there's capital. They took their capital. Money the firm was due them. And then I was age 28 with my own legal practice. It wasn't a very big practice, but it was. I was in charge of it, and had to learn very quickly what that meant. Which was the only accounts I'd ever seen were the annual partners meeting when I was handed a handwritten foolscap sheet of paper with the accounts on it. And if you didn't have a photographic memory, you were done, because you just passed it on to the next partner as it went past. And so then I had the firm, and the first thing I did was to fortunately, was a pal of mine who was an amazing help to me, came in, who was an accountant, and he was an apprentice accountant, a trainee accountant, and came in and sorted out property management accounts. And I think without that, we would never been able to build the platform that made the firm successful after a few years after that.
So I was going to ask, actually, so how do you, at a relatively early age, how do you learn how to run the business? Well,
it was trial and error. Mm-hmm. I also had decided at that point that the residential conveyancing wasn't for me. I thought it was pretty dull. It's not to say the business side of it was, but the actual work wasn't very exciting. So if I'm being completely honest, we just decided to call ourselves corporate lawyers and change direction. But the emphasis and the training in specialisation just didn't exist at that time. People were generalists. Most people were generalists. So the firm already had some corporate work. So I was blessed in that I was able to bring an old friend, a chap, Fraser Jackson, from Shell, where he had got a job with Shell. He'd been at school and university with me, and he came back, and he was much cleverer than me, much better lawyer. And we found from the early 80s that I was able to win work, to find work, and to bring it in. He was phenomenal at actually doing the work, right. And probably still is. And the combo worked, and we built it on that, where I was out doing things and trying to find new opportunities for us, and he was back at base actually making sure the jobs were done properly, which he didn't lose clients at all. And then subsequently, as the firm grew and developed, he trained people. So taking a bit of a jump forward, well, a long jump forward, if you take it into the late 90s, there was a whole team that he had trained of incredible lawyers who were able to allow real dynamic growth in the areas that we were concentrating in by that time, which was commercial law and corporate law. And we developed into one of the strongest firms in the country.
And just out of interest, where are you in Edinburgh in terms of the office at this point then?
The office is in Exchange Tower, which is in Canning Street.
Right, okay, yeah.
And we've been there for, I would think, pushing 20 years.
Right, yeah. Well, that's where you're at now?
Yeah.
And at this point, kind of where...
then Ainsley Place. We had a townhouse, three townhouses in Ainsley Place.
Right, yeah.
Not with holes knocked at different levels, and totally, hopelessly inefficient.
Right.
But the one good thing about it was that I had the drawing room all to myself. Right. The drawing room in one of the houses. So I had the giant desk that somebody said to me was a sign of a power-crazed executive. But anyway, I had the full leather-bound legal thing and a Whittakin-Reed table and chairs. So I felt very, very good about myself at that point. Yeah. But within a very short space of time, there was 3 people in that room. I was only one. Yeah. And the desk had shrunk.
And out of interest, at what point did the typing pool disappear?
No, it was probably, I would say the 90s probably. People still had secretaries then.
Right, yeah.
And people were still typing.
Yeah.
It probably into the 2000s. There wasn't typing. Pool didn't exist as such, but there was still 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 secretaries, whereas, of course, it's very different now, where people just absolutely do their own, and they have executive assistants, people that are able to look after diaries and meetings and facilitate good business practice.
You said that you got to the point where you realized that you liked going out and finding business.
Yeah.
Do you think you knew that when you started? Were you always like a people person, or were you always?
No, I don't think that. That's an interesting question. I've probably never thought about it, but just my first reaction would be no. I think it just happened. Somebody had to. It was clear, and the hardest thing in all the years that I was recruiting people is to find people that can do that. You know, it's actually comparatively straightforward to find clever people that are good lawyers, but to find somebody that can actually find the work is much harder, because they can't just be Mr. Jolly that goes out and about and plays. They've actually got to be able to win that work because they speak and promote the business, speak about the business and promote the business in a very good and solid way that persuades people that they should come and talk to you and come on board. So it's not just an out and about thing. You've got to be able to turn that into an instruction.
And can I ask, how did you go about doing that then? Because it's a real skill to then.
I went to everything. I went to every dinner. I went to every golf outing. I went to. I just made myself available, and there's people who support you in business. And I think that's still the case. People that want you to be successful, and they'll help. They'll say you should meet so and so, or mention your name to somebody. So if you've got a few people, it grows. It grows out into a network. And we didn't call it a network, but it was a network. And so if you've got one or two people in the right places who are trying to help you. The business can be promoted quite easily.
Was there any big wins that you remember back then when you were out on the golf course or on the meal that you were like, that was a...
Yeah, I suppose the slightly oddest one, I won't mention any names, but I was asked to take somebody to play golf at Loch Lomond, which is, people quite prize that. And I didn't know the guy was, but I knew the chap that was asking me, and he earned a favour. So I ended up with this chap phoning me and saying, I'd like to come. And I said, well, that's fine. And he gave me his name, and I got his name, and I thought, well, I'll just have a look and see who you are. And he was the 24th richest man in America at the time. Right. And he had a portfolio of golf clubs, not memberships, golf clubs.
He owned them all.
And he was, he was an amazing guy. And so he flew in on his very substantial plane and played golf, and I had a £200,000 instruction, which now isn't overwhelming, but at the time was a lot of money, instruction before he got back on his plane. And he continued to use us for years and years after that.
Did you play well? Do you remember?
It seemed I've not mentioned a name. I guess he wasn't very good at counting. He got stuck about 9. And once or twice I thought, I think it was maybe a little more than that. So, well, he won. He was always going to win.
Yeah. It's interesting how, we've touched on how things have changed, but actually, that still happens.
Well, these things will still happen. I think less so. The partners in Addleshaw Goddard, which is the firm that now exists, that through all the many changes in name and the various takeovers and all the rest, the firm today is Addleshaw Goddard. And Addleshaw Goddard is one of the best firms in the country, no question about it. One of the top firms in Europe, I would imagine, both in terms of its success and all the rest of it. The partners now don't have much time. They work relentlessly hard. It is a really tough game. But the firm does most of the marketing business. So you're promoting the deals you've done. You're telling the world that we, built a new railway line. So did the legal work to build a new railway line or a pipeline or a mega takeover or whatever it was. So the information comes out more professionally. Now, I'm not saying that people don't still win work by being out and about. Of course they do. But I don't think in a big firm such as Addleshaw Goddard, I don't think it's quite as focused on individuals as on the way the business acts. So the business needs to be entrepreneurial. The partners need to be entrepreneurial, but I don't think this sort of sociability. I mean, I went out for lunch. It's probably painfully obvious. I went out for lunch a lot, and spent a lot of time just talking to people about their businesses, and then you get to know them. You get to appreciate what they look for in a lawyer, and then you try and get the work. Nobody does that now. It's not got time, and they all run and go cycling instead.
Well, speaking of kind of network and introductions and what have you, we were kindly introduced to you by Dominic Tadai of the Mortgage Advice Bureau.
Mm-hmm.
And he gave me a specific question that he wanted me to pose to you as well. So I'm going to actually read it. He says,
I don't guarantee to answer.
His question, which is a good one, was, what would you describe as the biggest defining decision, whether good or bad, in your career?
I'm actually, and I totally believe this to be true, I've already mentioned it. I went to find somebody. I went to find the person who I knew was complementary to my skills.
Okay.
I knew he had a big future at Shell.
Yeah.
He was an extremely clever, hardworking guy.
Right.
And I've always said that without him, it couldn't have been done, or without somebody like him. But I mean, that hiring that individual with that skill set was the most important thing we've ever done. And if I could give a second example, it would be when in about 2004, 2005, somewhere about there, a group of, or two particular young solicitors who'd been with us from the start and showed outstanding promise. They were able, they cared about the business, they worked hard, but they weren't, not that, they were driven to be successful for the firm. They were for the firm. And Fraser and I met them and said, look, we would like you to join the management of this business, which had up until then really been controlled by us. We'd like you to join, and we will listen to you. This is not a nominal thing. This is reality. We're going to ask you to come on board. And these two individuals did that. And I mean, they've just been fantastic. And they're still there. They're running big departments in a world-class firm. Wow. And they were our trainees, trained by Fraser, and I hope to some extent motivated by me. And they bringing them into the management brightened us up.
Yeah.
It gave them, I think, a feeling of belonging. So they weren't going to leave at that point. Because, I mean, law firms are terrible for people coming and going and getting pinched for a few quid more. They became, and there was, and a significant other group of six, I can't remember, 6 or 8, kind of just joined in with that. They said, well, this is a firm that does listen, and this is a firm, and others became involved in the management process. Mm-hmm. So the two things, I think, together would be probably, I believe, the most significant things. People are the most significant things in a legal business. There's no, and perhaps most businesses, but it certainly for us, giving these people their head was hugely significant.
But it's interesting that you have said those two pivotal decisions have been effectively people related. Yeah, it's not about going into a different market, or it's not about buying that business. It's about people.
Going into different markets improved the business. We in 2007, I was with friends who were all in the banking sector, very senior people in the banking sector. They started to talk over dinner about the collapse of the wholesale banking market. I didn't actually know there was a wholesale banking market, if the truth be told. But I knew by listening that what they were saying was significant. I thought this is not good. And I mean, heavyweight people, seriously heavyweight people. And I came out of that meeting thinking there's something, and I wasn't even thinking about the global economic crash. I just thought, we're going to get a downturn. The banks are not as solid as perhaps they have been through the rest of my life. And so I was able and fortunate in being able to persuade my managing board that we should trim back. So if the question was ever asked, what's the worst time? That was the worst time in my life. We had perpetual growth from 1977 right through to 2008. I mean, ups and downs, you know, but generally speaking, always moving in the right direction. And we took out 30% of our legal staff, our staff.
And was that based on that conversation?
It was based on that conversation. And looking generally to see things didn't look good. I honestly had no idea what was going to happen, but as the extent of it, but we just thought it was going to be a downturn. And it was horrendous taking people out of that. And I spoke to my brother, who was in the construction industry and was well experienced. Yeah. And I said, what do you do? And he said, well, you tell managers how much they've got to take out. And then when they come back and tell you they can't, you just tell them to go away and come back with a figure that you've determined. So we had to take a pretty strong line. Mm-hmm. And it was not a happy time for any of us. It felt absolutely awful. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But the firm was in a good place when when the problems hit and the turnover fell off a cliff. And we had also decided to hire an exceptionally talented restructuring lawyer. They used to call them insolvency lawyers, restructuring lawyer. And we brought him on board, and he built a big practice, and that gave us the toe out of the morass that we're in. He was able to, that's the work that was there. That was and he utilised his knowledge and his contacts to pull the firm forward as well. Mm-hmm. So we had a lot of very talented people kicking about. But that was certainly the time that I remember not enjoying it. And I loved it every day of it for the entire rest of the time from 75 to now, you know. Yeah. But that bit was very uncomfortable. Yes.
And again, you've mentioned in off camera a couple of other things that have happened over your career as well. One of which involves a picture.
Yeah.
And I want to come to another.
It's strangely topical because I understand, and people who have my close and dear friends have pointed out to me that this podcast has been doing the rounds on the history of the repatriation of the Madonna of the Yard Winder by Da Vinci. Mm-hmm. So we were regularly taking over small legal practices just to add to our practice, either ones that were in a geographical location that we fancied or ones that had a type of work or particular clients that we liked. And they had all been very, very good, very successful. People fitted in. We took over a firm in Glasgow, and 68 days later, I was sitting at the lunch table of the Royal Bank of Scotland, the directors of the Royal Bank of Scotland, St Andrew's Square, a frightfully swish event. And to the table came one of the staff from the bank, and she handed me a piece of paper. And the piece of paper said, "Phone Joyce." Now, Joyce had been my secretary for 29 years. She was one of the most significant people in building the business. There's nothing Joyce didn't know, nothing she wouldn't have done to make the business better. I thought this is horrendous because she knows where I am. She knows it's serious. She knows where I'm with the bank. I'm not. So it must be something awful. And I honestly thought when the kids had been knocked over, I thought the house had burnt down. I mean, I just didn't know what to think. So I left the room and phoned Joyce and said, "What is it?" She said, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "No." I said, "What is it?" And she said, "Well, a Leonardo da Vinci painting's been found in the boardroom of the Glasgow office. The police have arrived. They've put the two partners involved in handcuffs and have led them out." And I sighed with relief. That's absolutely true. I sighed with relief. Yeah. That's okay. We'll deal with that.
Versus what you were thinking. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Was worse. And I'll never forget it. I just went, "Oh, right, okay." Yeah. And then off we went. I had... it's a long story.
Did you have to make your apologies from the...
Listen to the podcast. Yeah. I had 124 calls from news agencies around the world, including one from Condé Nast, which I thought was quite unusual. I then I phoned Alec Barr, legend of the big partnership, who told me what to do, basically, and I did what he told me to do, and that worked perfectly well. But the story is that these two partners in the firm that we had taken over, well, our partners, be straightforward about it, our partners who had been in the firm before had thought they were doing something perfectly, I believe, and always believed they thought they were doing something perfectly legal. They were repatriating, they were bringing a significant painting back into to its owner, the Duke of Buccleuch, and they were dealing with a loss adjuster, and they were being directed by an English solicitor. And again, I say listen to the podcast, but I never believed these guys were of criminal intent, the two lawyers. And subsequently at their trial, they were all charged with conspiracy. The jury threw it out. They said it's not. And I always remember a slightly wizened old detective constable from Ayrshire, because it was the Duke of Buccleuch, so it was Drumlanrig, saying to me, these guys are only guilty of stupidity. And I thought, yeah, you've been at this 30 years. You know, I believe he knew that the jury would never convict. It was a foolish prosecution. But that was my opinion. I mean, I'm not a criminal lawyer involved in prosecutions, but it was quite exciting for a day or two.
Wow.
And the subsequent trial was brought it all back again. So it was a learning experience.
Yeah. And the great story, by the way. And the other one you touched on was about a fraud that had happened.
It certainly, if the fraud had come later in time, much later in time, it would have been impossible to survive. And the reason for that is that I was sitting in my office, and I was told the Customs and Excise, a gentleman from the Customs and Excise was downstairs. I said, well, what is it about? He said, well, he won't say, but he says you do want to see him. So he came up, and anyway, he established that money had come out our firm illegally, and or we established it, but we discovered that we were probably about £100,000, £110,000 out. Now remember, it's 86. You know, my house is worth 25 grand, 30 grand maybe. It's probably got a £28,000 mortgage on it. So myself and the aforementioned Fraser, we got together and we worked out over about an hour just how much was due. We left the office together, walked around the corner and went to see our bank manager, which is, do you know Contini's restaurant in George Street?
Yeah.
That was my bank.
Yeah.
That was my bank. And where the stairs go down to the toilet, that's my bank manager's office. And it was the bank. I always think, because if I ever go in there, I remember that day. So I went in to see my bank manager, and we, Bank of Scotland bank manager, old school, and we told him the story. And we told him what had happened, everything, you know, who the partner was and how it had happened. And it was a pretty odd fraud altogether. But anyway, he gave Fraser and I £110,000 there and then, and put it in our firm's, or gave us the money and put it into the firm to cover the debt. So the firm was never, it was balanced the books, as it were. And never forget that. That couldn't happen now. No. Bank manager, he read the room, he read the people. He said, he said to himself, I'll get this money back. It's not a problem. Right. And he gave us the money that day without any forms, without anything. Wow. It was extraordinary. And without him, we wouldn't have survived.
Really? Was that?
Well, where was I going to get £100,000? Yeah. I mean, it was a figure that didn't exist in my world, you know. Yeah. And then we went to see the Law Society. I'd like to say they were equally as supportive, but that wouldn't be true. They were I think they took a very strange attitude. But anyway, we got over it. It took a wee bit of time, but we got going again.
Yeah.
Wow. You also have, through all of this journey, we haven't mentioned your first love, which is your football team.
Yeah, it probably is, I suppose. I'm certainly not first. But as I say, in my family, you didn't get the choice. You didn't say which football team do you want to support. We were there, whether you liked it or not. We were there I was the first, he says, I was there, my dad said I was there in 1958. I don't remember that. 4-year-old. I can just about remember a game in the 60s, 62, 63, when cup tie, we beat People's Rovers 51, quite a famous game, and Joe Baker scored 9 goals. And I think I remember that, but I could be kidding myself on. I might just, it might be something else altogether. But that's so I've always gone forever. Really.
And your involvement, how did that end up? Did you start as a lawyer involved, and that's how you ended up being involved?
The first time in 1998, Hibs had been relegated. The original board, which was made up of the committee of hands of Hibs, the Mercer time, when the group that had done that. And I think Sir Tom Farmer, when he came in and quite clearly saved the club from extinction, I think he just thought he would freshen it up a bit and bring some new people in. So myself and a chap, Steve Dunn, came on the board. Steve was sadly died last year. he was the HR director of Scottish Power, and I suppose Sir Tom would know who I was, and I met him on a plane, started talking to him. Then I was approached to go on the board, and then the chairman at the time decided that I don't think Tom O'Malley, he was a wonderful, wonderful man, so well educated, so intelligent. But as his wife said to me, "You'll be a better chairman. You're much more aloof than him." I'm not sure it's a compliment, but anyway, there we go. So I took over as chairman in '99 when we got promoted back into the Premier League, and I was there for about 3 years. But it didn't last very long, but it was good fun.
And what was it like being involved from that side of things as opposed to just being a supporter of the club?
It takes the magic away. There's no doubt about that. When you see actually, players at their very best, and the whole setup of football it's not really magical. Where you just go and just go and watch it, have a bit of fun, go away and get on with life. When you're actually in there, it's quite stressful. I had the day when Alec McLeish left, and I liked Alec very much, but he sort of saying, I've been approached by Rangers, but an hour and 20 minutes later, he was standing with a full Rangers regalia on, including a pair of brown brogues. Clearly the deal had been done some time before, or it was my view that it had been done some time before. But you get over that. He was an extraordinarily and is an extraordinarily engaging man. He did something very. I wasn't speaking to him, so a matter which I'm sure he was completely indifferent about. But we both ended up at a dinner. I had been telling anybody that would listen what a terrible man Alec was, and we were at a dinner together, and I caught his eye, and I thought, what did I do? Did I turn my back on him? Did I sit down? Of course, Alec just walked over and gave me a hug. The matter was over. He won. That was it. He's a very intuitive, high EQ.
Also a black belt in judo, and I can tell you that for sure because I've got my older brother's got a photo taken with him when he was a young boy. He got a medal presented by Alex. So there you go. So don't mess.
I wasn't going to fight him.
No,
there was never any chance of that.
How did you find that balance of kind of the Hibs? I don't know how much time it took. Was it a lot?
At the time,
a lot of responsibility.
It was quite a lot of involvement. Rod Petrie was the chief executive, an extremely able guy. He ran it on a day-to-day basis and contract negotiation and all that. He rebuilt that stadium. His drive, his careful management of money, built the stadium and built the training ground, found the training ground, built the training ground. Sir Tom used to say, give me bricks and mortar, not blood and bones. And that's what, and they left the club, with a stadium and with a training ground. That's significant. That made a big difference.
And when you obviously came back, and obviously now current chairman as well. So again, you worked very closely, obviously, with Ron Gordon.
Well, I when Ron bought the football club, I read the little snippets in the local papers. He's from Peru. His name's Ron Gordon. He's from Peru, and that he'd made his money in America. And I thought, he's buying my football club. I'll need to find out a wee bit more about him. So I phoned somebody who said to Ron, "There's a guy in Edinburgh. He knows plenty of people. Big fan. Would you meet him?" And of course, as Ron to that would always say yes to anybody. So I I met him in the hotel, the Grand Hotel in St Andrews Square where he was staying. 10 minutes he had me absolutely convinced that we had won a watch here. This was a star. I was with him for about 2 hours, and by the end of the 2 hours I'd done anything, to help him, to support him. He had the most remarkable smile that I've ever come across in my life. And it was genuine. He was kind, tough, but kind man, and so creative. The loss, I said at his memorial service, and I absolutely believed it then, believe it now. He was the best thing to happen to Hibernian Football Club in my life. Wow. The best thing that happened, and the worst thing that happened was his all too quick passing. Amazing man. Had so much personality, so much drive, and he was a huge loss to Scottish football. And I think if you spoke to Hearts, if you spoke to Celtic, Rangers, Aberdeen, they would tell you the same thing, because he came with no baggage. He came fresh to it and would go, well, why are you doing that? Why that's not the best thing for the league. And so he and I became very good friends. I stayed with him in his beautiful home in Miami a couple of times, and he told me that he wasn't well, and very shortly after I left him, he died. I was devastated.
But in that 10 minutes, that's interesting, that first 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
What, can you remember those 10 minutes?
Yeah, I can remember.
What happened?
It's just his energy.
Energy, yeah.
You know, and there was no pause. I walked in, he started talking about Hibs and what he hoped to do and what he thought was important. And he barely drew breath for about 2.5 hours, you know. And after that, I had so many good times talking to him. And he would ask and he would listen. He would do it. I mean, he made his own decisions, but he would ask, because I kind of carried the corporate memory. I carried the club history in my head, you know, so I could say, I don't think you should do that, or maybe we should look at that a different way. And he was very receptive to that. An extraordinary man.
And quite an honour then to now be chairman and continue that legacy.
And the greatest of all that is that he asked. When he was dying, he told Kit, his wife, and the two boys, he told what he wanted the structure to do. He wanted me to take over as chairman until, you know, the time comes when the family, one of the family will take over. And he wanted Catherine Hamilton, one of the other directors, to be vice chairman, who's an extremely able lady from Baillie Gifford, and you know that's what he wanted. He had thought about it, and he decided how things should go from there. No surprise to me that he had done that. Yeah, I'm a consummate businessman, a huge business, successful business that he built from scratch.
And I may be jumping with you, what would normally be your question, Alex, but you know, as you look back over your career, then what's I'll let you ask your question. What's been What would you say is your philosophy for kind of business then?
It's simple. It's a mantra, and it was never varied. And if you asked any of the guys that work for me, what would I say to that? It's always put the firm first.
Yeah.
Don't, you know, if you start thinking about, and when the time came, when, you know, I was getting on towards sort of 65-ish, and we had the first real federation with an English firm in Birmingham, Gately's, and Gately's had decided, we'd been 10 years with them in a sort of cooperation agreement, and they decided to float in the stock market. And of course, then, as it is now, in Scotland, you're not allowed to take external investment. So we couldn't float. Whether we wanted to or not, we couldn't float with them at that time, or it would have been a sort of complicated way we would have to do it. So I spoke to the partners that we had at that time, all younger, 20 years, 15, 20 years younger than me, and asked what they wanted to do. What direction do you want to go in at this point? Because we're coming out of this bigger business. Do we want to go back to being a significant but small Scottish firm, or do we want to do something else? And they overwhelmingly said we want to get bigger, not smaller. So I was charged with finding a firm suitable for merger stroke takeover, because they were always going to be bigger than us. And I spoke to 11, when we split with Gately's and they floated, we got 11 or 12 firms approach us. And I was, a good friend of mine mentioned Addleshaw Goddard, and he said, why did you speak to them? I said, I don't know much about them. And he said, well, the managing partner, John Joyce, he said, I shared a room with him for 10 years. And he said to me, I'll tell you only one thing. So he'll never tell you a lie. And I thought, well, that's not a bad start. So I met John Joyce, who has subsequently become a very dear friend. So we're sitting at a restaurant in Glasgow. And I said, where are you from? He says, Salford. I said, oh, you'll be a Manchester United supporter then. He said, I don't like football. I said, you don't like football? What sport do you like? He said, I don't like any sport. I said, I've got nothing to say. we're completely run out of steam now. Anyhow, we put that business together very, very easily, and I could see 7 years later, he's never told me a lie. He's never misled me. He's never said he would do something and not done it. He's amazing. And the firm has grown beyond belief. We're 150% bigger in Scotland than when we did the deal. And we have partners who are working all over the world. We have partners who are really at the very top end of the legal profession in Britain. And the success of that, the merger, choosing a merger partner is so difficult, so difficult. Yeah. And, you can get it horribly wrong. There's examples in Scotland of late where, things of big firms have come in and taken over good quality Scottish firms. It's just not gone well at all. Ours, I think, would be held up as an example to anybody. It's an overwhelming success. And we're just about to do it. We did it just as I was retiring. We went into Dublin, and it's going the same way. There was a great wee firm in Dublin that is growing now as we were a wee firm in Scotland. They're now growing the same way as we did.
Huge success.
A genius, he's a managing partner, and he would, without any question whether he says it as often as I did, he absolutely behaves that every decision is made for the benefit of the firm. And I would say of the 300 and however many partners are, 375, 385 partners, every one of them knows and believes that. Whether they agree with them or not doesn't matter. Yeah. If everybody in the business knows that you're making the decision based on what's best for them, collectively for them, then generally speaking, unless you get it wrong all the time, of course, but then it's that's a positive. That keeps people motivated, interested, and loyal.
It's interesting you said that because firm first. Because earlier on, when you talked about those two people, that you got on board, the two that were the second big positive decision, you'd said that they were very much for the firms. So I just was noting that. Yeah. So
and there was a group, and strangely enough, I'm having dinner with them all tonight. And there was a group, and it extended beyond this, but there was a sort of core group of 10 that was there. Yeah. They're all trainees. They all worked with the from their earliest age. They nearly all been trained by Fraser, and they'd all worked for us for ages. And we were a proper group. There was nobody going to leave. There was nobody going to mess us about. Everybody was in it together, and it gives us such strength. And John Joyce of Addleshaw spotted that very, very quickly. He also spotted they were quite young, and only 2 of us were old, so he was on to a good thing.
and that obviously is your business philosophy, but I mean, maybe kind of more broader than that. What about a life philosophy as well, if that's not too kind of hard a question on a Friday afternoon?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, I suppose you just try and achieve your best. You can't, I've not got very many talents. I wasn't the best lawyer in the world. But you just do the best you can, make of whatever talents you've been given, and try to help people, not to do the opposite. If you're trying to help people, most people will be there for you when you need them.
Yeah, amazing.
Lovely.
Malcolm, thank you so much for coming on, sharing a bit of your story, and good luck with Hibs and everything else you're up to in the future.
Yeah. The firm's going to go from success to success. The Hibs, I hope, will go from success to from where they are to success.
Thanks, Malcolm.